There are about 10 kinds of car sitting on British forecourts this month that the trade would honestly rather you took away today than left there another week. And by the time we're done, you'll know precisely which of them are the buy of the decade and which are a repair bill with a number plate screwed to it. That's the whole deal. A working sort of the cheap and sound from the cheap and doomed, with the numbers, the checks, and the exact questions to ask before you hand over a penny. Here's the thing most people never see. When a car has been on a forecourt for 60 days, the dealer isn't relaxed about it. He's paying interest on it. Stocking finance runs whether the car moves or not, the paint's going flat, the battery's going soft, and every week the trade valuation slides a bit further under what he gave for it. At 90 days, he's not selling you a car, he's cutting a loss. At 120 days, he'd frankly rather see the back of it than argue with you about the price of a set of mats. I've spent enough time in end-of-month compounds, walking rows of cars with dust on the bonnets, to know the mood. Nobody's begging in the theatrical sense, but the leverage moves, quietly and completely, from their side of the desk to yours. 3 flags before we start. Number 3 is the one that got me making this list. A very ordinary family petrol engine that runs its timing belt inside the oil, fitted to hundreds of thousands of British cars, and the manufacturer's own remedy for it has conditions and a closing date attached that most owners have never read. Number 4 is the car that took an average of 128.5 days to sell across last year, according to Auto Trader's own figures, and it is genuinely not a bad car. And number 8 is a car it is arguably unlawful for a dealer to sell you at all, where around 120,000 British owners were told by recorded letter to stop driving immediately. All 3 get paid where I've promised them. Before the list, one piece of plumbing that makes the rest make sense. A dealer's enthusiasm for a car is not a quality signal. The margin on the metal itself is thin and getting thinner. The money in a modern franchise dealership lives in finance commission and in the service department. And industry analysis reckons an electric car generates something in the region of 40% less after-sales revenue over its life than the equivalent petrol or diesel. So when a car is being pushed at you hard, that can mean the trade loves it, or that the manufacturer is paying to shift it, or that the whole segment has gone cold. And when a car is priced like an embarrassment, that might mean it's broken. Or it might just mean nobody in Britain currently wants that shape, that colour, that fuel type in that month. Those 2 things look identical on a windscreen sticker. Telling them apart is the entire skill, and it's what this list is really about. The difference between a car that's unwanted and a car that's unsound. They are not the same thing, and the gap between them is where every bargain in this country lives. Number 1. The 3-year-old ex-fleet electric car, straight off a lease. This is the flood. Company car tax made electric absurdly attractive to fleets from about 2020. Those cars went out on 36-month contracts, and they've been coming back in waves ever since. In the second quarter of this year, the SMMT recorded a record 110,761 used battery electric cars changing hands in the UK, up 67% on the same quarter of 2025. That's a torrent of near-identical white and grey SUVs with 50,000 motorway miles on them, all landing at once. What that did to prices was brutal. And, if you're buying, glorious. One analysis puts the average used electric car at around £20,000 now, against roughly £39,000 3 years ago. I'll be straight with you, though. The sources disagree on where we are right now, and I'd rather tell you that than pick the number that suits my argument. One dataset has used EV values still falling around 10% year on year. Another, from Kazana, has them up nearly 7% between March and July this year, with the 3-year 36,000-mile D-fleet benchmark rising about 1.5% in July alone. Both can be true if different bits of the market are moving in different directions, which is usually what's happening. I take the conservative read. The free fall is over. The discounts are still historically enormous, and the window is narrowing rather than slamming. For a car that has spent its life doing steady motorway miles on someone else's fuel card, with a full main dealer history because the leasing company insisted on it, that's about as good as used buying gets. Which brings me straight to the thing that decides whether you've bought a bargain or a boat anchor. And it isn't the mileage. Number 2, the early, small battery electric car, the first generation stuff. The little hatchbacks with 30-odd kilowatt hours sold on 130 miles of range, now doing 90 on a cold morning. Some have lost more than 70% of their value since 2022. You can buy a running MOT'd electric car in Britain today for the price of a decent second-hand motorbike. And for a lot of people, a short commute, driveway, home charger, that is an outstanding way to travel. But this is the one item where the risk is real and physical. State of health is now the single biggest determinant of what one of these is worth. As a rough market rule, rather than any kind of law, a pack in the mid-90s trades at the normal rate. Somewhere in the 80s knocks a few percent off. Down in the 70s, you're 10 to 15% under. And once a pack reads below, about 65%, the market takes 40 to 50% off because everyone knows what's coming. By the way, if you want to keep your car running for as long as possible without wasting money on unnecessary garage bills, I put together a guide called the 500k Mile Car Care Bible. It covers 101 habits that can help your car last longer, the warning signs you should never ignore, and how to spot unnecessary repairs and garage upsells before they cost you a fortune. To get your copy, just scan the QR code on screen with your phone's camera, or use the first pinned comment below. What's coming is a replacement pack, and depending on the car, UK prices for that sit somewhere between £5,000 and £15,000. On a £4,000 car, that is not a repair. That's a funeral. So the non-negotiable, a battery health report done independently before money moves, not the dashboard percentage, not the guess-a-meter range, a proper diagnostic read of the pack, module by module, where the car supports it. It costs less than a set of tyres, and it is the difference between a well-judged, cheap car and the worst £3,000 you ever spent. And here's the bit I like, because so few private buyers ask for it. Asking marks you out instantly, as someone who knows what they're doing, and the conversation changes tone, whether the seller wants it to or not. Number 3, the wet belt petrol. Right, this is the one I flagged, and it deserves the most room of anything here because it's the most common car in the country that nobody wants to buy second-hand. If you've owned a Peugeot 208 or 2008, a Citroën C3 or C4, a Vauxhall Corsa or Mocha, a DS, from roughly the mid-2010s on, there's a very good chance you had a 1-litre or 1.2-litre 3-cylinder petrol under the bonnet with the family name PureTech. Clever engine on paper, light, willing, genuinely economical, won awards. And its timing belt runs inside the engine, bathed in oil. The theory behind a belt in oil is not stupid. And I want to be fair to the engineers because they weren't idiots. A belt is quieter than a chain. It's lighter, and running it in oil cuts friction, which shaves a fraction off the fuel figures at the exact moment every manufacturer in Europe was fighting for tenths of a gram of CO2. The trouble is what oil does over time. It ages, it oxidizes, it picks up fuel dilution from short journeys, and the belt material, sitting in that soup, hot for years, starts to break down at the surface. It doesn't snap dramatically. It sheds. Fine black debris comes off the belt, circulates with the oil, and heads for the two places you least want it. The oil pickup strainer in the sump and the fine passages feeding the turbo and the top end. Block the pickup, and you've starved the engine of oil pressure. From there, it's bearings, and then it's the whole engine. Ford did the same thing with the 1-litre EcoBoost and the EcoBlue diesels. Honda used a belt-in oil in the 1-litre Civic. It was not one company having one bad idea. Here's what it means on a forecourt. Trade buyers know. Independent garages know. I've read a technician quoted describing these engines in one word, and the word was diabolical. So the trade prices in a possible engine and a used car with a good body, decent tyres and a full history sits there while sensible-looking people walk past it, which means one of two things for you. Either you avoid the whole family and let someone else worry about it, or you learn the checks, buy one for silly money and sort it properly. The checks then. First, engine code, not badge. Codes in the EB2 family, EB2, EB2DT, EB2DTS and their relatives are the belt engines. Stellantis has since moved the 1.2 across to a chain, phased in from around 2023, largely in the newer 48-volt hybrid versions. Second, documentary proof of a belt change with the revised part by someone competent. No invoice, no deal, and no amount of charm from the seller changes that. Third, oil level and condition on the dipstick before it's warm, because chronic oil consumption is the other half of this story. Fourth, listen on a cold start for a rattle that clears after a couple of seconds. Fifth, and this is the one people skip, ask when the oil was last changed and how often, and if the answer is every 2 years, it's only done a few thousand miles, walk. Short journeys and long intervals are exactly the diet that kills these. Do all that, and a wet belt car can be a very sharp buy. Skip it, and you're the person who paid £6,000 for a car and £4,000 for an engine. Hold that thought, because what the manufacturer offered people when this all came out is where we're heading later, and it's the part that made me genuinely cross. Number 4. The premium electric car that nobody can shift. Here's the payoff on my second flag. According to Auto Trader, the slowest selling used car in Britain across the whole of 2025 was the MINI Electric Countryman, at an average of 128.5 days on a forecourt. The national average that year was 30 days. It is not a bad car. It's well built. It drives nicely. People who own them like them. It just landed in the narrowest slice of the market there is. Too expensive to be a runabout, too small to be the family's only car. Electric at a moment when premium electric residuals were being hammered. That's the whole category. Big battery, badge-heavy electric cars, 1 to 4 years old, priced now at a fraction of what somebody paid. And there is one specific trap in there that catches British buyers constantly. The expensive car supplement, the so-called luxury car tax, is charged on the car's original list price when new, not what you pay for it. In 2026-27, it's £440 a year, on top of the standard rate, payable in years 2 to 6 of the car's life. The threshold is £40,000 for petrol, diesel and hybrids, and from April this year, it rose to £50,000 for fully electric cars, applied to zero-emission cars registered from April 2025, which means a used car you buy for £30,000 can still carry that supplement every year until it's 6, purely because of what it cost somebody else. Check the original list price. Check the registration date. It's a 5-minute job that has cost people well over £2,000. Let me stop the count for a second because there's a pattern forming, and I'd rather you saw it than took my word for it. Every car so far is cheap, for a reason that has nothing to do with whether it's any good. 1, because too many arrived at once. 1, because of a component you can actually measure before you buy. 1, because of an engineering decision made to chase an emissions target. 1, because it's the wrong size and shape for the month it landed in. Not one of them is cheap because it's badly made. From here, the reasons get harder edged. Cars that are cheap because of something the state has done, something a manufacturer has done, or something nobody has finished doing yet. And number 8 is the sharpest of the lot. The car a dealer arguably cannot lawfully sell you, and 120,000 British owners found that out by post. Number 5, the pre-2015 diesel. Short and blunt. If it's a diesel registered before about September 2015, it probably isn't Euro 6, and that single fact governs where you can drive it. London's ULEZ now covers all 32 boroughs at £12.50 a day, every day, but Christmas, with a £180 penalty if you don't pay. £90 if you're quick about it. Birmingham charges non-compliant cars £8 a day inside the Middleway Ring Road. Bristol charges £9. The petrol threshold is Euro 4, roughly 2006 onwards. So old petrol is largely fine and old diesel largely isn't. If you live in Devon and drive to Cornwall, none of that touches you. And a big, comfortable, well-maintained pre-2015 diesel estate is one of the great remaining bargains in British motoring. If you live in a zone or visit one twice a week, it's 50 quid a week you didn't budget for. Same car, completely different verdict, depending entirely on your postcode. Check the plate on the government's own checker before you fall in love with it. You're still with me, and we're just over halfway, with 5 to go and the 2 ugliest ones still ahead. If this is the kind of thing you want more of, subscribe. That's genuinely the only thing that decides whether I keep making them. Right? Next up is the segment where a tax that hasn't even started yet is already moving prices. Number 6, the X-Fleet plug-in hybrid. Mechanically, a plug-in hybrid is 2 drivetrains in one car. Engine, gearbox, high-voltage battery, motor, and the control systems to referee between them. Everything that can go wrong with a petrol car can go wrong, plus everything that can go wrong with an electric one. And the ones that lived on a company car scheme were frequently never plugged in at all. The driver took the tax break, ran it on petrol, and the battery spent 3 years at a state of charge it wasn't designed to sit at. You can spot that. Check the average consumption on the trip computer. Check whether the charging cable is even in the boot, and ask straight out how often it was charged. Then, the political half. From April 2028, electric vehicle excise duty comes in. 3 pence a mile for battery electric cars, 1.5 pence for plug-in hybrids, on top of the standard rate of vehicle excise duty, uprated with inflation from 2029-30, with mileage declared at renewal and cross-checked against MOT odometer readings rather than any tracker. The government reckons 3 pence a mile is about half what the average non-electric driver pays in fuel duty, and the OBR expects it to raise well over £1 billion in its first year. For a plug-in hybrid at half rate, the actual money is small. What's moved prices is the noise around it, which brings up something I keep noticing. The used market reacts to announced taxes years before they arrive, and it usually overreacts. That's my read, rather than a fact I can prove to you, but I've watched it happen enough times to trust it. Number 7. The 1 to 3-year-old Chinese EV. This one's changing fast enough that I'm slightly nervous quoting figures at all. Chinese brands now account for more than 1 in 10 new car registrations in the UK. In March, the single best-selling model in the country was the JQ 7, with over 10,000 registrations that month alone. The used ones are getting hit hard. One residual value analysis has Chinese brand electric cars retaining only around 22 to 35% of their original price after 3 years, against Tesla and Porsche holding somewhere near half. I'd treat those bands as one data set rather than gospel, but the direction isn't in dispute and there's a simple mechanism behind it. When the new one is being discounted hard, and in many cases carries a government grant of £1,500 or £3,750 taken straight off at the point of sale, the 2-year-old one has nowhere to hide. Why pay $22,000 for a used example when the new one with a full warranty and the grant applied is $26,000? Which is exactly why they're a genuine buy if you plan to keep it. The car doesn't know what it's worth. Two things I'd check hard: the length and transferability of the battery and drivetrain warranty in writing, and whether there's a franchise dealer within sensible reach of your house, because parts and body panel availability for the newer brands is the real unknown, and it's the sort of thing that only bites when you're already annoyed. Number 8. The car with an open recall. Here's the payoff I promised. On the 20th of June 2025, Stellantis UK issued an immediate stop-drive order for every second-generation Citroën C3 and first-generation DS3 built between 2009 and 2019, fitted with Takata airbag inflators. Not a service action. Stop driving the car now when it's safe to do so. Those inflators can degrade with age and, on deployment, rupture and fire metal fragments into the cabin. Around 120,000 owners in this country were affected. Dealers were overwhelmed, and some people were quoted, "waits running well into the following year." The part that ought to interest you as a buyer is what happened next. Investigations found affected cars still listed for sale on used car sites with no mention of the order at all. Under the General Product Safety Regulations 2005, a business can't sell a product it knows to be unsafe. So a trader doing that is in serious bother. A private seller is under no such obligation. Buy privately, and the entire responsibility for knowing sits with you. So, run the registration through the manufacturer's recall checker and the government vehicle recall service before you view, not after. It takes about a minute. And here's the flip side, because there is one. A car with an open recall that has since been done with paperwork is often a car with a brand new safety component in it, bought at the price of a car with a cloud over it. Unfinished recall, walk away. Completed recall, that's just a cheap car with fresh parts. Second pattern break, and then 2 quick ones to finish. Notice what's happened to the reasons. We started with supply and depreciation. Market forces, nobody's fault. We've ended up at a car you were ordered to stop driving. And running underneath the whole list is the same quiet fact. In almost every case, the reason the car is cheap was created by somebody who isn't you, and the cost of it lands on you. After the last 2 items, I'm going to pull that thread as hard as it deserves, because the wet belt from number 3 has a second half to its story that I've been sitting on. Number 9, the diesel executive saloon. Quick one. Big German diesel saloons and estates, 5 to 10 years old, are among the slowest moving cars in the country. One Auto Trader analysis had a diesel A4 saloon as the slowest seller of its year at 95 days. Diesel now averages around 32 days to sell against 24 for used electric. Nobody wants them. They are also, if you buy the right one with a proper history, superb long-distance cars that will do 250,000 miles. Non-compliant with a clean air zone, though, and it's number 5's problem all over again. Number 10. The nearly new car that the new one undercuts. The electric car grant knocks up to £3,750 off eligible new electric cars in the top band, or £1,500 in the second, applied by the dealer automatically on cars priced at or under £37,000. Meanwhile, manufacturers are chasing a zero-emission sales target of 1/3 of their new cars this year, with a fine of £15,000 hanging over each non-compliant car sold outside their allowance, while battery electric share has been running well below that target, so they discount hard. And every time they do, the 1-year-old version of the same car on a forecourt down the road loses value overnight through no fault of its own, which makes the nearly new car a poor buy and a superb negotiation. Price the new one with grant properly, then go and make the nearly new offer with that number in your hand. Now, the wet belt and what they offered people when it all came out. You were sold that engine on a promise, and the promise was long, cheap, low maintenance ownership. Servicing stretched out, a belt that on the paperwork was good for the long haul. That's what was written down for you, and it's what you paid for. Then the engines started coming apart in numbers across Europe. Here's what was put in front of you: an extended warranty on the earlier 1 litre and 1.2 PureTech engines, 100% of parts and labour, up to 10 years or 112,000 miles, for excessive oil consumption and premature belt degradation. Sounds handsome. Read the conditions. Servicing must have complied with the manufacturer's own maintenance plan. Diagnosis and repair must have been carried out through the authorised network. Meaning, the very schedule that helped cook the belt is the schedule you had to have followed to the letter, and the dealer network is the only place allowed to confirm you're owed anything. Then, a compensation platform open to European claimants and extended to the UK for money you'd already spent, but only for expenses incurred between the 1st of January 2022 and the 31st of December 2024. A window, with both ends nailed shut. Spent $4,000 on an engine in 2021. Wrong side of the line. And alongside all that, revised belt intervals, the change point pulled in substantially from where it originally sat. That last one is the bit I keep coming back to. Because the interval didn't change when they discovered the belt was worse than they thought. The belt was always exactly what it was. What changed was that the number they'd published was no longer defensible. Somebody wrote down a service interval that a laboratory could justify and a British driveway couldn't. And every owner doing school runs and short cold journeys on that schedule was, in effect, running an experiment they were never told they'd volunteered for. I'd love to tell you exactly why the belts degrade. I can't, honestly. Internal documents reported from Europe put it down to chemical attack on the belt from aged oil without pinning down what starts it. Nobody has explained the root of it publicly in terms I'd call satisfying. And here's the arithmetic, which is the accusation. The permanent fix existed the whole time, and it's the oldest fix in engine design. A chain, running dry, driven off the crank, where a chain has run since before any of us were born. They've now fitted one. The new 1.2 uses a chain. So the remedy wasn't unavailable or unaffordable or unknown. It was simply worth more, in grams of CO2 on a certification test, to leave the belt in the oil. And the difference between those two decisions has been paid, engine, by people who bought a small French hatchback and expected it to last. You know the shape of it now. The next time a maker responds to a hardware fault with a paper remedy, a revised interval, a thicker oil, a goodwill scheme with a date on it, you'll recognise it for what it is, and you'll go looking for what changed in the metal. Usually nothing did. Let me widen out for a minute, because there's something in this that goes beyond cars. Every price you see on a windscreen is an opinion, not a fact. It's the aggregated guess of thousands of people about what a thing will be worth later. And like all guesses about later, it's shot through with fashion, fear, and whatever was in the news that month. Which means a market is constantly mispricing things. And the mispricing is where all the value sits for anyone prepared to look properly. That's not a trick. It's judgment. And judgment is a skill, which means it's learnable, which means it isn't reserved for people with money or contacts or a trade card. Half a dozen small pieces of knowledge, freely available, let you look at a car everybody else is scared of and know something the crowd doesn't. And once you've done it, you never quite go back to being a person who accepts a price as given, right? The procedure, not a rule of thumb, an order of operations you can run on any cheap car in the country. 1. Registration into the government recall checker and the manufacturer's own checker. Open recall, stop, no exceptions. 2. Registration into the clean air zone checker. And be honest about where you actually drive, not where you tell yourself you'll drive. 3. Find the original list price when new and the first registration date. and work out whether the expensive car supplement applies and for how many more years. And £440 a year, years 2 to 6. And it follows the car, not the owner. 4. MOT history in full, because advisories tell you the story the seller won't. 5. Fuel specific check. Electric, an independent battery state of health report, no deal. Petrol from the wet belt families, the engine code and documented belt work. Plug-in hybrid, evidence it was actually charged. Diesel, the Euro standard and a long drive from cold. 6. Ask how long it's been in stock and believe the answer only if the advert history agrees. Past 60 days you have real leverage. Past 90 you have most of it. 7. Price the equivalent new car with any grant applied, so you know what your used car is competing against. 8. And this is the one people skip. Write down your walkaway number before you go and give it to someone else in the household, so you have to explain yourself if you break it. Run that, and the verdict comes out the same every time. Cheap because unwanted. Buy it. Cheap because unsound. Leave it. Here's what I'd do tonight. And it takes 10 minutes. Get the V5C for whatever's on your own drive. Find the engine code and the date of first registration. Put the registration through the recall checker and the clean air zone checker. By the end, you'll know 3 things you almost certainly don't know now. Whether your car has an outstanding safety action against it, whether it can drive into the nearest city without a charge, and whether you've been paying a tax supplement you could have planned around. Then do it to your daughters or your neighbours and watch the reaction when you tell them what you found. One last practical note. If you're offered finance on the forecourt, take the paperwork home. The FCA has confirmed an industry-wide motor finance redress scheme covering agreements from April 2007 to November 2024, where commission wasn't properly disclosed, worth an estimated £7.5 billion across roughly 12 million agreements. And I'll be straight. It's tangled in legal challenges, and I don't know when the money actually lands, so don't plan your life around it. But understand what it tells you about how that desk has historically worked and read every line before you sign. Now, comments. I want the confessions, not the triumphs, the confessions. What did you buy that you regret? What was the moment you realised, and what did it cost you to put right? The pre-2015 diesel bought a fortnight before your council announced a zone. The bargain electric car with the pack that turned out to be tired. The lovely little hatchback with 3 cylinders and a belt in the oil. Put the model, the year and the number, because the number is what stops the next person making the same mistake, and somebody reading it this week is about to. I read them all, and I've learned more from the ones where people admitted they got it wrong than from anything else that comes through. There's a thread here I deliberately left alone. I've talked about batteries and belts, but not what happens to any of these cars after a shunt. How a modern structural battery pack or a bonded aluminium shell interacts with an insurance assessor's calculator, and why cars with barely a scratch on them are being written off. I'm still gathering proper figures, because the anecdotes are wild and the data is thin, and I'd rather bring it to you when I can prove it. If you want it when it lands, subscribe. Until then, check the code, check the recall, and never fall in love with a car before you've read its paperwork.